do you do this? And I go, yeah. Even if I don't know how to do it, I'll learn it. And, you get to do a bunch of different opportunities depending on what people need. Uh-oh.
You're muted.
I can't hear you. What we're doing.
Sorry. Do you like having kind of multiple ways that you express yourself artistically? Is that a good thing?
Definitely. And I've always loved comic books. I'm part of the reason that I was excited to come to this is because I've got ideas for stories. I do write as well. I've been published a few things, so not only am I talking, I'm learning. So there's another opportunity to do something. I've had characters and stories, and I keep sketchbooks. I keep idea books. I'm always writing stuff down for later. So you never know when those ideas will come back and be able to, plant them and actually get some harvest.
Great. All right, Brian. What I don't even know where to start with you because you have had this long and varied award-winning career, and what maybe the best place to start with you is what are you working on right now?
Right now, I'm working on a project for DC that hasn't been announced, so I really can't talk about that. And I'm doing a book called Moonshine at Image Comics, and another one called Faithless with Boom Studios. Those are creator-owned things. Those aren't characters. The DC stuff's that's their stuff.
Yeah. So the others are your own projects?
Yeah. Which is what I've been doing a lot lately.
And how often are you doing screenwriting projects?
Not as often as my agent would like. I'm like not into that so much. I'll do it every once in a while, but when you're working that way, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, Yeah. I prefer just a real tight group of collaborators, but
Yeah.
Because when you start, talking about like film and TV, there's a lot of money involved. So
yeah. So lots of people have opinions, right?
Lots of people have opinions.
I would think that would also be true working at a place like DC.
No, it's not.
No.
I mean, maybe a little, but nothing that I ever found to be limiting at all. I've never had anything kicked back with one of their characters. I've had some of my creator-owned stuff kicked back, saying like, "Hey, we're not comfortable publishing this."
Yeah. Okay. I want to get more into that creator-owner versus the other stuff when we come back for more questions. Do you want to say a word about how you thought of yourself as a kid aiming toward an art career? I know you went to CIA, but were you one of those kids who always thought they were going to do this for a living?
I never wanted to do this when I was a kid. This was not. I mean, I know a lot of people, like Clarence just said, this is something that he's dreamed about since he was a kid, and Terri too. No. When I went to CIA, I was firmly in fine arts. I was doing printmaking and painting, and then I graduated, and I was doing printmaking and painting at night when I was done with my job. Because that's just the way of the world. And then I fell into this, and it was, it turns out I was good at it.
It turns out you were.
Yeah. But like going to CIA, if there was any sort of comic leanings from anybody, they would squash that. It was just like verboten. It's like, no, that's not what we do here.
Yeah, I think at that time they did, right? Like not so much today.
No, probably not
because the
today.
world has changed and we know what comics are now. But yeah, you're not the only person I've heard say that there was no, Jim Groman. Do you know Jim Groman?
I know Jim. Yeah, we were in the same
school together.
Yeah, we did go to school together. We were in the same class.
Yeah, and he has said the same thing, that at the time they didn't quite know what to do with him. He did want to do that sort of leading thing, and so yeah.
But it wasn't until like I was at CIA when I met Harvey Picar.
Picar,
at Arabica, just right across the street from the school, the Coventry School over there. And I saw what he was doing, and then some of the stuff that was happening. There was a magazine called Raw, which that sort of like opened my eyes to like, wait a minute, maybe I can do both. Maybe there are some influences, rather than Roy Lichtenstein showing how ironic it is. Which that was okay. You could copy comics, but don't try to make up your own.
You're right. Yeah. Well, these things change over time, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Nicole, I see you over there.
Hi.
So you come to this with a different set of skills than the other panelists. You are a writer and editor, right?
Primarily an editor, yeah. The writing that I've done has been more promotional, and at least when it comes to the work that I've done in the comics industry. So yeah, my comics career has been, a large part of it has been editing. So yes.
How did you get there? Did you trip into it, or like Brian did? Or?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I would say so. When I was in college, I studied English, and at that point, I wasn't really sure what I wanted my career to be necessarily. I knew that I wanted to do something that I could find somewhat fulfilling and that used my skill set and that I could use to support myself. But other than that, my mind was wide open as far as the range of things that I thought I could potentially be interested in. So what led me to comics was actually kind of coincidentally. I had always been interested in comics. So I will say that, that was one of the many things that I was kind of considering. But at one point on my college campus, somebody had posted up in all these different locations a flyer saying interns wanted, and there was a picture there of Vampirella. And it mentioned, the qualifications that you need to have. And then one of them was smell like fresh sunshine. And I thought, okay, this is a workplace that does not take itself too seriously. I will feel comfortable there, as opposed to, a more corporate environment where I felt like I would be intimidated, honestly. And so I applied for that internship. And, this was a long time ago. I don't think that the comics landscape at that time had the same level of competition that it necessarily does now. So it was not terribly difficult for me to get that internship, and that eventually led to working there part-time and eventually full-time. First, I started off, it was a very small operation. The company was called Harris Comics, and they did just publish that one title, Vampirella. So I got to work closely with the editor on, reviewing the scripts and artwork as it came in. But because we were so small, I was also doing a lot of answering emails, shipping out comics that people were ordering directly from the publisher. So real like entry level stuff. But a few years later, my boss at that company was working at Marvel. And when I was looking for a job again, after a gap, the fact that I had that history working at that company and working with that person who had been the editor-in-chief there, that kind of helped me get my foot in the door. And I started at Marvel as an assistant editor, and I stayed there and was eventually promoted up to the point of being full editor. I was there for about 5 years. And then after that, I stepped down, but I continued doing freelance editing work and eventually working for Comics Experience, which is an online education company for people who are interested in learning how to write and draw comics and get into the industry.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of an editor in that situation? I think sometimes people don't think, they don't think of the word piece having its own direction. And my guess is maybe as an editor, you also dealt with visuals too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because what an editor does in the comics industry is not always necessarily going to be the same as what an editor does in prose publishing or in, you know, any other industry that has an editor title. An editor in comics, at least in my experience, is a lot of, there's some creative direction to it, but there's also a lot of administration, project management type work. So I would say that working with Marvel, a lot of what I did was collaborating with the artists and writers, managing schedules, coordinating timelines to make sure that things were completed on time, and working with the people who were responsible for getting it published, getting the printing completed, and doing the marketing and publicity, all of those kinds of things. So in editorial, again, I'm speaking specifically to my experience with Marvel because I know it varies from company to company. But we worked with a lot of people who were both in the publishing office doing that kind of behind the scenes work, but we also interacted a lot with the writers and the artists themselves, sort of providing some creative direction and sort of being the go-between between the higher ups in publishing and the creative people who were working to get their stories told in the way that, you know, that they wanted to tell them, basically. And I feel like, you know, this touches a little bit on what Brian was talking about earlier, because depending on your own experience, freelancers in comics, you can sometimes be in situations where they have a whole lot of creative freedom, and other times in situations where there's not so much. And it really depends a lot on the context and who you're working with and who you're working for.
Okay, so I think that there is often a gap between, especially for young people who like a certain genre, who like comics, or who like even a genre of comics, what they think happens as for people doing that as a job, if they even know that it can be a real job, and the experience of doing that. And I wondered if we could just sort of go down maybe in the same order that that you all introduce yourselves and talk about the differences between what a young person might expect that you do versus how your days really are. And Terri, I'm going to pick on you because you were first on my list.
Sure. Well, I've had a few specific career paths. So do you want me to just, it could take a while going through all of them. So maybe would you like me to talk about the books I'm doing now, or the comic strip? What do you think?
Start with the strip, because I think the strips are, you know, a unique, understandable, discrete thing. So.
Sure. Basically, my days would be me at my desk, and that's about it. Once in a while, I travel to my porch and back again. It very much like living in a pandemic. Nothing.
I was going to say, it was like pandemic life.
There was really no change
No.
when this all went down.
No, not actually. I always say the one thing that's changed for me, and I think a lot of other creators, if you work from home, is now you see people going back and forth behind you. There's more commotion in the house because you're here. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Well, when you were like launching the strip, talk a little bit about how you got it generating, right? Because it's not just I sit down and I draw what I feel like drawing today, or is it? I don't know. I haven't done it, so.
It kind of is. So what I did was I worked in batches. I'm just the type of person who I can't take a script from completely start to finish in the course of one day. So what I would do is I need to sort of get on a roll in a mode. So I would take about a week or so, maybe a week and a half, to write about a month's worth of strips, actually more than that, because I would narrow them down. So I needed about 30 strips by the end of that time frame. And I know it sounds like a lot, but believe it or not, when you do it for so long, it kind of becomes second nature, and you kind of know which ones to weed in or out. And then
are you writing, not to interrupt, but you know, so when are you literally like writing in a book? Are you writing concepts? Are you writing out scripts? Are you drawing while you write, or what were you doing?
No, that's a great question. So back then I would actually just write on a legal pad, nothing on the computer. It was just easier for me to kind of write. Usually it was in script form. And I usually had narrative boxes, and then I would have dialogue sort of interchanging. So it worked best as a script. And if I needed to just indicate art, I would. But once in a while I get like a purely visual idea, and then the writing would come later. And so then I would just kind of roughly draw something out. I mean, it looked like chicken scratch. It looked like nothing. And then once all my writing was done, I would do like rough strips of all the ones that I wanted to do. And then eventually I just worked right on the computer. I have a huge Cintiq, which I use, a big drawing tablet. And I just do it right on it. I have templates that I would use, just to start with. And it took about maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks or so. It's usually like a month at a time. So I would complete a whole month's worth of strips after that period of doing art. So that was basically it, and it was great. I loved it, but I could definitely feel myself sort of, getting pulled in a new direction, and I think it lived its life. Mm-hmm.
When you were doing the strip, did you have creative input from anybody, an editor, or were you completely isolated, or and was it just you and your brain cells?
It was me and my brain cells. I did have editors at the syndicate, but usually they were just there to tell me if something crossed the line, and it sometimes did, because I'd like to kind of push the envelope a little bit, more so in the beginning than later on. But I had a lot of creative freedom, so it was great, and that's one of the reasons why I really loved it.
And say a little bit more about what it's like now, because you as you said, you've moved into a different realm.
Yeah, well, it's not much different. I'm still here at my desk, and it's a different process because now I'm writing long form. But it's similar in the sense that I tend to write autobiographically. So, but instead of putting myself in, like, giving myself the adult lens like I did with a comic strip, because it was from the viewpoint of a working mom. This time I just kind of put myself, put myself back in time, and I'm writing sort of from my 12 to 13-year-old lens. And even though I can't remember, my day-to-days back then, I can definitely remember how I felt. And I still feel kind of like I'm stuck in that age to a certain extent. That works for me. And so but now instead when I write, I tend to write directly on the computer, just like in a Word document. And then eventually, once everything's approved, I plug in the rough art, and then I do all the finished art. That's it in a very, very general nutshell. But yeah, there's a lot more involved. But you can actually find a guide to how I create the books on my website, which I put in the chat. So,
great.
Yeah, there's a lot of great links on there. So if anyone's interested.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. Clarence, do you, the many projects that you have going on, how would you rate them on a scale of like fun to like a real job?
Okay, so the teaching is really a lot of fun for me, because I'm pouring everything out of my head, everything that I know, all of my experiences, and giving them to kids and saying, hey, run with this. So that's a lot of fun. And I really like helping clients come in, because sometimes they come in with just an idea and a need, and they know one of two things. They either know what they like or they know what they don't like. So now it's kind of interviewing them, talking to them, kind of figuring out what they're trying to get accomplished visually, because a lot of times these things are going to be in someone's hands. It's going to be on somebody's laptop, somebody's phone. It might be on somebody's desk. It might be, it's so many different mediums that people communicate. So it's just like, I have to talk to them and be able to communicate with them and interpret what they're trying to tell me and what they're trying to accomplish. So there are times that could be a lot of fun, and then there are times that could be pulling teeth. So I mean,
what are some of the things that make it like a real job? Because I think it's important that people understand that even though it's creative work, there's the work part of it, right?
Oh, so, definitely.
Yeah.
There is the so you can, and someone can come in with an idea, and if they can come in with the idea in their head, and that idea might be something that they are sold on, but they can't express what it is. So you might go through a couple iterations, 1, 2, 7, 10 times, and then go back to the original thing that they really like, and they might still say that's not quite it. So that can be really frustrating sometimes. Yeah, I think that's just trying to get what's in their head out. That's probably the biggest challenge for me, and I think that's a challenge in this particular context for comic writers, comic strip artists, or comics artists. You've got these really cool ideas. How I get it from my head to either the keyboard or to the paper. Yeah, that's the hardest challenge, at least for me.
Yeah. Brian, when you're working on a comic that isn't your creator generated, what is that experience like? What's the idea generation experience like? Are you getting a lot of input?
No, not until it's too late. But no, usually when I get asked to do a character that the company owns, they want my take on the character.
Okay.
That's pretty much the way that I've worked. I turned down a lot of stuff just because I don't have anything to say about a certain character that they would like me to do. It's like, I've got nothing on that character.
Yeah. So they invite you to do one, and it's something that you're interested in. What's your process then?
Well, first I'm not interested, and then it sticks in my head, and I end
we're
up
always starting from not being interested.
I wrote Wonder Woman for 3 years. I had no intention of writing Wonder Woman ever in my life, ever. I didn't really, I didn't know the character. I didn't really, she seemed to me like, well, it's Superman, but it's a woman. It's kind of like the same sort of character. I completely have changed my tune. I adore that character. I'm super protective of that character. I think in the wrong hands, that character has been portrayed really like it's a disservice to the character and what that character means. But I had to grow into that with her. That wasn't something that I had originally. Originally, I mean, the way that happened, I was at dinner with the publisher, and they'd asked me to do. They wanted me to do one of the characters in the Justice League, and they've been asking me forever. It's like, do an extended run on one of those characters, and I was always like, no, I don't want to do an extend. No. And finally, it's like, oh, I could do this with that character, and it like, it just, the germ, and then it boom. And so we were having dinner, and I said, well, you know, everybody's getting all the characters being shuffled at this point. And I'm like, well, what are you gonna do with Wonder Woman? And they told me, and it was appalling to me. It was like, you cannot do that to that character. You will fundamentally damage that character. You don't know what and then I just started riffing. It's like, what if you did this? Or you did this, you know, this kind of stuff. At the end of that dinner, I'm writing Wonder Woman.
So what made you start to care about what happened to her? Like, going from how I would have seen her.
The idea, what they were going to do was so terrible. It was like how anybody could, you know, it was so obviously dreamed up by a couple of men that they just didn't understand what they were doing, you know. I've never said what it is, and I'm never going to say what it is.
I can sort of tell that you didn't really want to go there, although I'm dying to know. But I understand. So then you're in. By the end of dinner, you're in. And now your job is to create Wonder Woman for the next however long period of time. How, you know, Terri kind of talked to us about how she did her strip. Was it the same sort of process for you doing Wonder Woman?
Well, what I did was, the comics can be, as Nicole knows, comics can be very fluid. When things aren't working, the events get tried, you know, and the universe has changed. It'll never be the same until next summer when the universe has changed. That's just the way it works. I had a story to tell. I had an ending where I was going to leave her, and so I wrote them a 3-year outline of what I was going to do. I Tefloned it. I got them to sign off on it. So I didn't have to participate in any of the events that were going on. So Wonder Woman existed when I was doing her on an island. At that time, they made Wonder Woman and Superman a couple. What a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. And but that was not part of, I didn't have to touch on that at all. Superman never appeared in the book. Besides, Wonder Woman would be, I think she'd fall more for Batman than Superman. Superman's kind of
too square.
A little too square for her. Yeah. I mean, she's
she's kind of bad.
Yeah, no, she's out of the three of them. She's the she's the badass.
Yeah. All right, Nicole. I'm wondering what your you told us a little bit, but what is the work part of what you do? Because it sounds like you also have a lot of fun, but what's the job?
Ooh, okay. Well, I think that has, my comics background has not been completely linear, and so much of that answer really depends on the specific situation that I was working in. I think that probably at Marvel, it would be exactly some of the things that you're touching on, sort of negotiating that relationship between the corporate requirements and the creators' creative goals, really, and sort of being the go-between, getting it from both sides. On the one hand, the corporate higher up saying, this is the direction that we need to take, these are the things that we need to avoid, always with the priority of basically making money for the company, which is, that's their job, that's their role. And on the other hand, you have creators who have a very specific vision of what they want to create. And I think that sometimes if those two things clash, then the editor's role is to get right in the middle of it and sort of diplomatically manage both of those needs, or sometimes competing sets of needs and interests, with hopefully the best possible outcome. And so I think, that was maybe the trickiest part. In some ways, it's something that I kind of enjoyed because for whatever reason, that whole diplomacy thing kind of appeals to me, just as part of my nature, but it was also kind of challenging. And I would, gosh, I'm trying to think of some examples from other aspects of what I've done. Deadlines are always the hardest because, again, sort of the editor is where the buck stops, kind of. And if something doesn't come out in time, it's kind of on the editor to put the necessary pressure on the creators, but hopefully in a way that doesn't stifle them or freeze them up. So I think, if I'm looking at it, if I'm trying to look at it from this sort of more broad perspective, in every role that I've had, I would say maybe that might be the most challenging and trickiest thing, is just sort of negotiating between what are sometimes competing interests among the many people you're working with, because it is often a collaborative and a team process. So just serving so many different interests, I think, can be the most challenging.
Yeah. What kind of person do you think is well suited to the kinds of things that you've done in comics? Like, you came out of what sounds like a literary direction, a literary trajectory. And I'm wondering what some of the qualities are, because when we talk about careers in comics, we're not just talking about, there are people who do things other than just draw, right? So what are the qualities that you think might set somebody up for enjoying the kinds of things that you do?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things is just having a really strong grasp of storytelling, story structure, and particularly visual storytelling. So when I first interviewed at Marvel, I remember the editor-in-chief at the time was Joe Quesada, and when I got in front of him for that stage of the interview process, I was talking with him a little bit about the fact that I had done some theater in college, and that was part of my background. And I said, but I guess that's kind of unusual, right? And he said, no, actually, we have a number of people in editorial here in comics where, they did a lot of theater back in the day in school or whenever. And I came to realize how true that was, and how, almost any visual storytelling format is going to help provide the skills that are going to be really foundational in any aspect of comics. And earlier, in response to a question in the chat, I was typing in that, Scott McCloud writes a lot about sort of the theory and practice of visual storytelling from an artist and a comic writer's perspective, how the text and the visuals work together. And I think that's a really important thing, to just sort of have an understanding of how that works. Even if you're not an artist or a writer yourself, just sort of understanding, just the foundation of it, if that makes sense. And
it does, yeah.
And I think also, I was mentioning diplomacy. I think some kind of people skills. Now, a lot of people in comics tend to be kind of introverted, not necessarily, but I consider myself more or less an introvert. But in comics, you communicate with people in a lot of different ways. So while I might not feel comfortable like going up on a stage and talking to a bunch of people and giving a speech, I feel pretty confident about corresponding with somebody over email or over phone, talking through details of a particular piece of work. So that's another thing, is just sort of being able to, even if you do it in kind of a clumsy or roundabout way, being comfortable communicating with people and digging into details about, trying to phrase this right, so please bear with me, but understanding when you're working specifically with someone who is a writer or an artist or creator of some kind, being able to look at their material, try to understand what their intent is, and then try to predict what the reader's likely interpretation is going to be, and make sure that those things are aligned. So it does require a certain level of analytical ability. So I think just having anything in your background or your education that allows you to practice articulating what works and what doesn't in story or art or any kind of creative process, that's all really, really useful.
Brian, I'm wondering what you think of how your fine art and printmaking experience set you up for what you do for a living.
I think differently than a lot of people, a lot of my peers, you know. But I mean, like the way that I approach things, it's different than like in this business, I'd say 90%, 95% of the people in it, this is what they wanted to do. They were driven to do this from being kids. You know, this is all they know. And, you know, unfortunately, that makes them, you know, like what Nicole was saying, that like they're very introverted and they have a very set way of doing things. And also the characters behave in a certain way. And if they don't behave that way, they'll call you to task. I mean, a lot of these people were fans before they were professionals. And they behave the same way, you know. Fans are like the most brutal people on earth. Oh, except when they come to the conventions, you never get anybody saying to your face that they don't like what you did, but you know, you lock them in a room for a year. Boy, they really they're quite vocal.
And what about in terms of the art itself? I mean, you were trained, you said you're a painting major, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my scripts are notoriously art direction light.
Oh.
I don't tell artists camera angles or unless it's really important. It's the really, really, really light because I don't want to, they're not my hands. If I wanted to get so specific about something, then, you know, go draw it yourself. Yeah. And I think that's really served me very well. And as far as like the artists that I work with some really, you know, some of the greatest artists in you know, comics historically, some of them too. And, you know, they all say the same thing. It's like, you give me all this room to, you know, for my vision. I don't think, there are a lot of people that consider like the writer, the director. I'm not the director. The artist is the director. I know if we're going to use a movie analogy, it's because it's their show.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just writing it. I think, you know, with comics, because it's serialized, maybe it's more like I'm a showrunner. But again, I'm not the director. You know, I have to leave room for the person I'm working with to do their very best work.
It's the good part of the collaboration piece, right? Like you get to see something that somebody else came up with. And
yeah, well, and long ago I stopped trying to guess what it was going to look like. It's just,
yeah,
I'm always pleasantly surprised.
Clarence, I see you throwing a lot of great ideas into the chat, and I'm wondering what you think are the like two most important things that a young artist can do if they think they want to be to go into comics professionally. What are the like two things that they should be doing now?
I'm going to go with something I heard Brian say early. First of all, just read. You've got to have those stories and read. Feed your mind. The more you have inside, the more it's going to create more ideas. So I'm big on feeding your brain, and then get a sketchbook, and just if you want to draw. If you want to write. You know, I know a lot of kids are always kind of thinking, I want to do this thing, but take the but out. You don't have to have instruction. all you really need is a piece of paper and something to write with, or type with, or whatever. But get it on paper. Don't leave it. And that's been really important for me as I've gotten older. My memory has gotten shorter. Get it out of your head and put it on paper, because at least when it's on paper, it's real. It's something that you can show someone else. I can tell you I got a great idea all day, but if I show you a piece of paper and you see this character, or you see this expression, or you see this idea, or you see this story piece, that's something that you can build on, and it's very concrete. So just and collecting ideas. I'm huge on collecting ideas. You're going to see ideas everywhere all day, wherever you go. Put it in your sketchbook. Write it down. Cut it out the magazine. Take a screenshot of it. Whatever. Just get it so you can have it, and you'll start to create your own visual library. You'll start to create your own vocabulary. You'll start to feeling comfortable. The more you do it, the more you start to feel comfortable creating ideas and sharing ideas.
Terri, what I was recently listening to an illustrator's podcast where they were talking about how weird it is. All these illustrators in this podcast were teach at some level, and they were talking about how weird it is to come across artists who, student artists who want to be illustrators, but don't have like favorite illustrators. They don't know who's doing it. Could you talk about, say something about whether you think it's important to familiarize yourself with what others are doing in that field? Is that, or not? I mean, not necessarily, I don't know.
Sure. So I actually never really did anything with my illustration career, or my major, I should say, other than illustrating my own work. So I can't really speak to illustrators out there, but I can equate it to what I've done myself as far as being an author and a cartoonist. Yeah, I think, well, personally for me, it was really important because it actually really led me to discover what kind of style I like to do and what I just personally like myself and admire. And I think it's okay to, even emulate or copy it at first, not to rip someone off totally in a professional sense, but just to try and get an idea of what you'd like to do and where your style is. So yeah, I think it's important to start looking up other artists or authors that you really have an interest in. And I think it's a great way to learn.
And then what I think everybody wonders at a certain point, can you really be in comics for a living and make a living at this? So I want everybody to answer that one. Like, is this a viable way to make a living? And we're going to go with you because you're still.
Oh, okay. I have been actually able to make a living from this. It took a lot of work and effort, but yeah, I eked out a living somehow. I don't think you really go into this to, and as far as, trying to, you're not going in this to become a millionaire. That shouldn't be why you're doing this. But you definitely should want to make a living. You should be able to. So you might sometimes have to have creative ways of doing it. Like, for instance, one of the reasons I decided to work for American Greetings is because I'm just a very type A person, and I like having steady income, and it was a way for me to use my creative skills while I was pursuing my other goals. And with syndication, I actually had to keep my day job at American Greetings for the longest time until the syndication stuff really started to take off. So that took a few years, and then I was able to make a living there. And it was the same with the books. So it's kind of like, sometimes you have to work 2 jobs, but if you love it, if you feel like there's, a personal goal that's within your reach, then go for it. So I'm a big believer in chasing your dreams, and so yeah, I think you can definitely make a living. It really just depends how and when you want to do, but yes.
Any of the other panelists want to take a crack at that question?
You can make a living doing this. Yes. Who knew? I mean, I when I started doing this, it wasn't. I didn't envision myself where I am right now, but it was just like because it was scratching the creative itch, and I think that's like probably that's what drives most people in a creative field anyway. It's you got to do it, and if you're not, if I wasn't writing comics, I'd still be writing something.
Clarence or Nicole?
Yes.
That's as quiet as you've been.
I think you just got to be willing to hustle, and when you're young, the best thing about being young is you have a lot of energy. You don't have a lot of bills or obligations, so you have the opportunity to try stuff, see if you like it. And if you don't like it, go on to the next thing. You have the opportunity, and this is going to sound a little goofy, but you have the opportunity to try something and to fail and it not have any huge ramifications. You can go out there and try something for a summer and go, you know what? That isn't what I really wanted to do. And it's okay because you don't have any other responsibilities. It's almost like going to the buffet table and going, trying this and trying that and trying the other. And the things you like, you keep doing. And the things you don't like, you don't try it anymore. And you don't have any worries to do it.
That's a great point. Like failure, the role of failure in creative work, I think, is under discussed, and it's important because by its nature, good creative work is an experiment a lot of times, and experiments sometimes fail, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I think failure is what keeps us going.
Yeah, totally.
It's like if I did exactly what I wanted, if I got it right, it's like, oh, I'm done. It's like, drop the mic and walk away. It's like this, every time I finish something, it's like, I could have done better. And I'm always trying to do that. I think people getting into this business, or really any sort of creative field, it's like, you've got to be able to deal with rejection because you're going to get rejected a lot, especially when you're starting out, because believe me, you're not good at it. I was there. I wasn't good at it. I had to become good at it. And a way to do that is forget what no means, because you're going to hear no a lot. Just like that. It's just, I don't know what that means. I'm going to try it again and just keep going after the same people,
So you have a willingness to become a pest?
I think that there's definitely, that's a part of it. Yeah. I mean, if you've got your foot in the door with somebody, don't be like a real pest, but be a, be a little menschy about things,
Stay hungry. It's okay. It's okay to say, I want to do this thing. And then you got to put the work in. Nobody became better at saying, I want to be better. It doesn't work like that. You got to go out and actively do the thing. If you want to be a good writer, write. And it doesn't mean writing comics. You got to write whatever you can get a hold to. It might be a poem. It might be a story. It might just be some advertising type for the local pizza house or a coupon. It doesn't matter. Write it or draw it. Experiment.
Nicole, I'm sorry. I wanted to give Nicole, because we're a little over time, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, thanks. Well, I agree with everything that everyone has said so far. And Brian, if you were just following up on Clarence's comment, I defer to you before I continue.
I was just gonna say that being successful at something is 10% talent and 90% discipline. You know, you just got to do it, and you got to put in the time. That's the only way you're going to get any better at something.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I would agree with all of that. And I would say that when it comes to persistence, I think Clarence's point about just doing the work, it's one thing to be persistent or to be a pest in the sense that you are constantly trying to contact somebody else, asking them to give you a job or asking them if they'll collaborate with you. That's different from continuing to work on your craft and improving it and listening to people's feedback and using that feedback to really improve. And then that's when you've sort of earned your credentials and earned your right to be persistent, but in a way where you have something to show for it. You're demonstrating your progress and you're demonstrating your value.
Yeah, great point.
Definitely.
Well, you guys are great. I don't know if there's any other questions that need to be asked. I think we're sort of done. But I could talk to you all for another hour. Thank you so much, Jill. I don't know if there's any way that these things are supposed to end, but
well, I would say that because I mean the next thing starts at well, let me make sure I'm right about this before I say something that is not true. But what I was going to say is that, the next thing doesn't start until 3. So, you know, if you wanted to stay and chat with people, I can hang here, and anybody who wants to go can go, and anybody who wants to stay can stay for another 15 minutes or so. I did want to make sure to just encourage any of the young artists that are out there, if they have any questions, you know, don't be shy. I know sometimes professional artists can be kind of intimidating, but don't be. They're here because they want to be and they want to share ideas with you. So feel free to jump in at this time.
you know, Jill, I noticed there's like a bunch of great suggestions in the chat, and will the chat be retrievable so that we can go back? Because I see recommendations that I want to look at that I haven't had.
Thank you all so much for adding those, because we know that you probably have looked at a whole lot of things over your careers, and the fact that you've mentioned a few things here is really valuable. You're right, Karen. So I'll see what we can do about that. I know that sometimes chats are savable and sometimes not. So
yeah,
so I'll check that. And also,
okay, great.
Just to remind folks that we have one more session this afternoon from 3 to 4. And then later this evening, we have Alison Bechdel, who is a graphic novelist and does some wonderful work. And that'll be a really interesting thing too. So even if you're taking off either after this or after the one at 4 o'clock, please come back at 6:15 or so to check that. That's all I have to say. So I'll just hang you in case somebody wants to talk a little bit, but otherwise, thank you everybody, for the panelists, for sharing your wisdom and your enthusiasm and all that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
All good.
All right. Nice to meet you all.
Likewise.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Likewise. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
I think I'm just gonna hang out.
Okay. That's fine.
I'm gonna jump, but
Fine.
it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm rolling too.
Later, B.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
I actually have to get going too. I'm sorry, but it was wonderful.
It's really so great to have you all. I just love how there's such a nice range of experience and interests, but we know that you're all busy, and the fact that you're willing to share your time, and especially on Zoom, because we're also Zoomed out. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Much appreciated.
Not a problem.
I'm going to be looking for everybody's stuff now.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Me too.
So true.
You're not going to
So
find my
true.
stuff. My stuff ain't out there yet.
Yeah, everyone had great suggestions too in the chats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different genres too, so that's a cool thing. I looked at I think pretty much everybody's before you came on, so I was like, oh yeah, many people's I've seen before, some people's I hadn't, but that was also exciting, and yeah, it's all good stuff.
Okay. Well, take care, guys.
All right.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
You
care.
too.
Bye
Thank
now.
you. Bye.
And then there was one.
I
Bum, bum,
know. I just wanted to
bum.
see if anybody had any questions left. I didn't want them to be left out. Well, Clarence, it sounds like you have a really wide range of experience. That's really great that you were able to create this life as an artist in a lot of different ways, and you have a lot to offer.
You know, it's funny because my mom and my dad, well, more my dad, used to say, you know, you're built like a football player. I can't believe I have an artist.
Right. You don't choose it, do you? It's just who you are.
There are times I wish that I was getting paid millions of dollars
Right.
for hitting someone.
But you don't have to, you know, as an artist, you don't have to take any hits to the knees or anything. So, you know.
No, I do not. And but then
That's
again,
good.
if I had a couple $1 million,
You'd take the risk?
no, I wouldn't.
No. This way you can draw and tell stories about football players and not have to deal with
I
people.
I can totally draw, I can totally write, I can totally take pictures and
Yeah.
make stories of them up, and you know, that's fine too.
And I think one of the best things about the kind of thing that you do and some of the other comics artists as well, or actually some artists in general, is that you get to do things. It's almost like living multiple different kinds of lives. You get to sort of investigate through imagination, you know, living different kinds of people's lives or different characters' lives.
I do, and I try as best I can. The advice that I give, I try to take myself. I try a lot of things, and I try to fail, you know, and you know, as you get older, the failing part gets a little bit harder to deal with, because of the ego.
Yeah.
You know, if you can put your ego behind you and just go, okay, let me put myself in a position. You know, do you remember when you were young and you didn't know a thing, but you wanted to do that thing? And
yeah, and you don't know that you don't know, so you jump in and you
so
do
you just
it.
jump in,
Yeah,
and you know, the learning and the failure went hand in hand.
Right.
You know, you failed, you dust yourself off, you go, okay, I'm not gonna do that again, and then you went back and you tried something else or some variant of that thing.
Right.
And then you would have these little goals. If I could just do this one little thing really cool, it'll be worth me falling on my butt. And then you get that, and then you get really excited. And then you go, okay, I can do this thing really good. I have mastered this. Let me try this. And it starts all over. When you get a little bit older, we tend to not want to fall, and we tend to want to take it a little bit safer. So you just kind of, you almost kind of, I want to do that thing, but not really.
Yeah, not enough to risk the embarrassment or the pain or the loss or whatever. But yeah, that's what's great about being young, you know, as an artist and being able to try those different things. And it really is such a great time to experiment, like you were describing quite a bit in the chat, I know, and when you were talking as well, that experimentation is such a great way to learn about what you're really good at, what you might not be interested in ever again, which is fine. It actually is really useful information.
That's the you know, the one, you know, one of the best things about being a kid or being young is you have a world of opportunity. And I remember when I used to be a kid, people would say that, and you're like, what does that mean? You can do and try anything.
Right.
Anything. And you don't have any bills, you don't have any obligations, you don't have a job you gotta be at. You can just get up and say, you know what, today I'm gonna do blah blah blah. And you can go do it.
Right. Well, the kids would tell you that they're restricted by, you know, oh, people telling them what to do and so on. And they're right. They do have those kind of limitations, like people telling them. But I think you and I have been both. We've been kids and we've been older adults, and we know that that one of the huge benefits with kids is that you get to try a lot more than you do as adults. And people also, I think, when they're trying with drawing styles and things like that, just having jumped into a lot of different workshops and being somebody that works with kids who are learning to draw or learning to write, it's just really great to see their inventiveness. And, they're not as locked into ways of thinking yet too. So they're able to be more creative and inventive. And so that's something that's a benefit that kids.
They are learning their aesthetic.
Yeah, right. And that's what you were suggesting when you said to go look at photographs, look at, all these different kinds of things that you start to think about. And maybe you keep some of the things that appeal to you. Maybe you have some books that you think are really cool, or some, from magazines, you see some stuff, you go online, you start to, create a kind of folder, a digital folder of stuff you like. So you start to develop your own aesthetic. Those are great ideas for developing who you are.
That's I forgot to mention that. That's another thing that this generation has.
Right.
You carry a computer in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You can put the ethereal online.
Yeah, right.
You can go get, create a Pinterest page.
Right. Yeah, all kinds of creative outlets.
You can pin things there. You can create a Facebook group. So if you're interested in the art of blah, 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 you can say, here's a local group that's interested in the art of blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Please join us. And then you've got people who are sharing your interest, and all those different people bring their viewpoints and their opinions, and now you're sharing and creating.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's one of the big advantages to that. Some disadvantages to social media and phones and stuff, but a lot of great opportunities there too. I think especially for artists. Yeah. All right, I am going to cut out. But again, thank you so much for your time and
thanks for having me.
Good energy. Yeah. All right. And hopefully we'll see you again soon, and we'll look you up online and all that good stuff.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.